Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we're going to go through the answers from the developers, another developer Q&A from Vyacheslav Bulanikov, or BVVD as you know him, and we'll be going through this in separate parts. So this video you see here will be about the aviation questions, the next one will be about the ground forces, and then I'm going to lump the naval and helicopter ones together with a bit of the miscellaneous stuff as well. So that's pretty much what we're going to do. There's a lot of interesting questions. Unfortunately, some of the answers are a little bit short and don't really say anything, but then again, that's generally how it goes with these things. At least it shows that they're interested in certain ideas. Anyway, let's get into the aviation part. The first question is, in realistic air battles, the introduction of SAM SPAGs on airfields at top tier has helped protect those wishing to repair on the airfield. However, as with before, there is the possibility that some may choose to simply wait out a battle on the airfield and let the SAMs do all the work to win the game. Do you have any plans involving preventing this style of play and preventing the exploitation of airfield protection? And the answer is yes, we have such plans. So my general opinion on the SAM stuff is that it's been overall positive at the higher echelons. It means that bombers are actually allowed to land without just dying. It means that if you are hurt and can make it back to the airfield, you can actually, repair and take off again. It has actually made airfields useful, apart from a lot of vehicles taking off from them at the start of the game. Now, when it comes to the SAM AAs, they are incredibly effective if individuals are going in a straight line or not turning too hard and have to, bleed speed hard. But the thing is, pretty much every single vehicle at the highest echelon of the game, apart from maybe the Q5, has weaponry that can effectively ground pound. And this is something which has to be noted when it comes to aerialistic. There's this idea that aerialistic is just a PvP fighter, game mode, and that's it. It isn't anything else. That's not true at all. There's a bunch of AI just sat around the place on pretty much every single map, and if you are able to influence the map by killing some of those AI, then you put your team in a winning position. Same with killing bases and all of this different things. So if you see somebody who's just sat on the airfield waiting for people to try and kill them, just go on ground pound, because you'll make more RP doing it, you'll make more SL doing it, and also at the same time, you won't get hit by a SAM on the airfield. And then if they decide to take off to try and counteract what you're doing, then you can then attack them, because your team is in the ascending situation, because you will have more tickets than the enemy team, and therefore if the battle ends and he doesn't fight you or she doesn't fight you, then you win. It's as simple as that. So whenever you just see this, just go ground pound. And yes, I know a lot of people say, well, would they play, the game for the PvP aspect, and sometimes you get in these situations. That's fine. If you only solely play the game for the PvP aspect and aerialistic, you have a simple way of, getting into the next match, so you can have more of a PvP setup. You can just land at your airfield and J out. And what that'll mean is you leave the battle, you don't have to pay repair costs because your plane is, it hasn't been hurt if you haven't taken any damage in the air, and you can get into the next battle and you can, start doing that PvP stuff again. But if you want to win the game and don't want to do it by trying to sacrifice yourself to SAMs, then you can just ground pound. Every single gun, as I said, apart from the Q5, is very effective at killing ground targets at top tier, whether it be light pillboxes, stuff like medium tanks, when you're talking about 30 millimeters, things such as armored cars and AAs, all of these things can be destroyed by the planes. And since we have that new style of map where you have the central area where you have a lot of light targets, and those light targets now count for battle tickets, you can make a ton of SL and a ton of RP doing it. One of the things during the Build-A-Bear events where you see the bombers going to high altitude and kind of just staying there, what a lot of people actually end up doing is they just, let them do it, go ground pound themselves, win the match, and get a ton of RP and a ton of SL. And in this situation here, you should do the same thing. It's as simple as that. But as I said, if you are focused on the PvP aspect of the game, you can also do that too, from the other side of it. The next one is there any possibility we may see a line of Finnish aircraft in the Swedish tree like we did with South African vehicles in the British Ground Forces tree? This could offer some interesting additions to the Swedish tree, such as the Westland Lysander, the Saab 35XS, the Folland Nat F1, and the Hawk 51, and also the MiG-21 MGBT, as well as more supporting aircraft to fill out the gaps within the Swedish tree. The answer is, at the moment, we don't plan to separate the Finnish line, like we did recently the South African vehicles and the British tech tree, although we will add more Finnish aircraft in the Swedish tech tree for sure. So there you go, you're going to get more Finnish vehicles in the Swedish tech tree. They did say when Sweden was added that Finland would also be incorporated into their tech trees as well, so you're going to get the Finnish vehicles. Hopefully they're not all just premiums though, hopefully they do get some in the standard tech tree as well. That would be really nice. But let's just break down the actual list of vehicles here, right? So when you look at the South African vehicles that were added to the British tree, the reason why the subtree works incredibly well is the fact that all of the vehicles are pretty much domestically made in South Africa. All of them are, integral to South Africa, and even though some of them do share some similarities with the British, they are all unique South African designs. And apart from maybe, I suppose, the Oliphant, which of course is very heavily based on the Centurion, but it is also heavily modified, making it uniquely South African. So in a way, what you have there is you have a completely unique line of vehicles in the British tech tree. Now let's compare that to what we have when it comes to these Finnish aircraft which are put in. So we have the Westland Lysander. The Westland Lysander is a vehicle which was used by the Royal Air Force. It was also built by Westland Aircraft, which, is of British descent. So it's a British aircraft with no modifications for Finnish service. You have the Saab 35XS. This is the Draken, and it is 12 fighter versions for the Finnish Air Force. They were built by Saab and assembled under license by Valmet in Finland. There is nothing different between these and actually other Draken variants that could easily be added to the tree anyway. You have the Folland Nat F1, which is exactly the same as the Lysander. The fact that it is just a British vehicle, which was built by Folland Aircraft, which of course is a British aircraft manufacturing company. It was used by the RAF, so you could definitely make an argument it should just go in the British tree. Then you have the Hawk 51, exactly the same ideas behind that one as well. So once again, we have another aircraft that should be in another tech tree, and then the MiG-21 MGBT. Now this is just a Finnish designation for the MiG-21 BIS. It had upgraded RWR and active ECM because they used it for recon purposes, or at least that's what it was designed for. So what you have here is you have 5 aircraft which are just very similar to ones that could easily be added into other trees, and then the MiG-21 MGBT, which is incredibly similar to one we already have in the game, with a very slight difference in the form of the ECM and the RWR. And you're comparing that to the South African tree, where all of the vehicles are insanely unique, give insanely interesting playstyles compared to the rest of the British vehicles, so I don't think the comparison really holds up. I don't think Finland should get its own line in the tech tree. There isn't enough vehicles which are unique. I think going ahead and doing what they're doing, where they either do event vehicles, premium vehicles, or just vehicles to supplement the tech tree, is the way forward. It makes a lot more sense because the unique aspect is not there. If we're having a look at stuff like Hungary or Romania, though, they do have quite a lot of unique stuff which could be added to different nations in the game. And also, I would say, just as an added point, when we have a look at this Finnish aircraft idea, it has the same problem that South Korea does, and also North Korea, where both of those nations heavily used imported equipment from other nations, apart from a very few different, innovations of the last 20 years. Everything before that was very much imported from either the USSR or other areas, such as China. So you end up in a situation where you have very similar subtrees of different nations compared to the main tech tree. So it would not be worth it. It's much better to do unique event vehicles, premiums, or just stick single vehicles in the tech trees when they're interesting, like stuff like the K series of vehicles for the South Koreans, sticking them in the US tree. In previous major updates, we saw the introduction of the MiG-21 BIS, Su-17, and most recently the MiG-23M to the USSR tech tree. Are there any plans to also introduce the MiG-21 BIS, Su-22, and MiG-23 MF-ML to the East German line after the MiG-21MF in the future? And the answer is we have some of the above listed aircraft, or we plan some of the above listed aircraft in the German tech tree. This is really not a surprise at all, right? I think we could all guess that this was going to happen. When it comes to the era or the era of history that we are in when it comes to aviation, with the split of East and West Germany and using vehicles from either side of the wall, it's not a surprise to see that we're going to get more USSR-based vehicles for the German faction. Generally, they have tried to make them a little bit unique compared to the USSR counterparts, and I hope they continue with this trend instead of just doing straight copy and pastes, because obviously that's a little bit more boring, I think is the way to put it. But right now, Germany's in a pretty decent place with the F4F just added, and I'm sure in the coming updates they'll get some USSR stuff as well to balance it out. It'll be interesting to see what happens after we leave this era, when we go back to the whole unified Germany stuff, what is going to be in the aviation tech tree after that, and also what the tech tree will look like where will the vehicles actually go. Do you have any plans to introduce the remaining aircraft from the Century series of American jet aircraft? Still left are the F-101 Voodoo, the F-102 Delta Dagger, the F-105 Thunder Chief, and also the F-106 Delta Dart. And the answer is yes, we do. Which is pretty much the stock answer when it comes to will you add X? It's either going to be we are looking into it, yes, or maybe. When it comes to the yes answer, that generally means that there'll be one in the upcoming updates, maybe the next major update. We did also see in the leak last month the F-105 Thunder Chief turn up. It was around, which was pretty cool. But I'm sure we'll see the other ones as well. The issue is, when it comes to American jet aircraft, is there's so many of them. Basically, we're at a point now where America already has a very full jet set of aircraft, and they could easily add more if they wanted to, but the question is it going to be a point where it's so lopsided that everybody is going to just grind America because they have all the fancy toys? And if you have been playing jets recently, especially 7.0 to around about 9.0, you'll realize that most teams are America versus America, plus everybody in the middle who is also playing alongside, or it'll be America versus everybody else, because of the fact that so many people are playing American jets. So because of that fact, if they add more vehicles to America and they give them more mechanics and more very good vehicles, you're just going to swing that pendulum even more. I would personally say right now America's in a pretty decent place when it comes to its aviation. I would much prefer other nations be focused on for a little bit instead of America. And even though, I'm sure America will get a new jet every update going forward, because of the fact that there is that large American player base who really enjoys the vehicles, I personally enjoy them too. But at the same time, when you have a look at, let's say, Italy's, high ranks compared to America's, it is kind of sad. And I do understand, of course, as well, Italy does have limited options in this area, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that we can't add a few extra ones to Italy to give people a reason to grind out those higher echelons instead of just firing more stuff at America. Is there any possibility we may see bigger aviation maps for rank 7 jets? And the answer is we consider the existing big maps, 128 by 128, as quite suitable for high-tier battles. Since speeds are high there, opposing teams approach each other quickly, and there is no need for a lengthy flight to the targets. The size of a location allows attack from flanks while safely retreating to the airfields, and larger locations are potentially possible, though they require significantly more work from the team while decreasing the battle dynamics. So at the moment, we don't have plans to create locations bigger than 128 by 128. So this is actually a really interesting answer because there is a bunch of different factors here. The first one we're going to look at is the whole this requires significantly more work from the team while decreasing the battle dynamics. What that tells me is they've been testing larger maps, but what they found is issues, whether it comes to the engine or how the development side of things goes with these larger scale maps. If they add more stuff to them or they make them larger, maybe they have to reduce the amount of stuff that is around, otherwise the load on the well, obviously I don't really know the technical stuff, but like the load on the game or the load on the engine is too much, therefore it will break it or it will crash it. So further development would be needed in that area. That to me is, when reading that, that's what I get out of that. And we see this in a bunch of different things, when it comes to naval EC, when those game modes were very large and a lot of stuff going on, there was a ton of stuff constantly breaking in them. Same with Air EC, even though Air EC is in a much more stable position, but at the same time, that's still only 128 by 128 maps. The next level, let's say even by 150 by 150, may cause some serious issues that we obviously don't know about. And maybe they get fixed in the future, maybe they don't, but at the same time, I kind of agree with them. 128 by 128 is a huge map size. It does mean that you can go around the sides, you can flank, you can go to different areas. The problem is twofold. Well, actually, no, threefold. The first one is Boulogne-sur-Mer. So Boulogne-sur-Mer is a map which was taken out of rotation once the map rotation filter was added. The reason why it was taken out of rotation was because so many people banned it, and therefore it would never actually be seen in rotation. Therefore, it was completely useless in the map pool, just the same as the Volokholamsk map, the large version of Volokholamsk, which was removed. So what this means is that people didn't like playing it, whether it's because of the fact that they would, sit their engines with their afterburners on, and they would just burn out of fuel before they get across the map, or something such as the idea that the engagements took too long, and therefore people wanted that high octane, high action quickly, which is what we see in a lot of these smaller maps. Whatever it is, that is a fact, and that is not, Gaijin doing it. That is the community at large removing a map like that because of their ability to be able to ban it or dislike it. So then we have another factor, which is the fact that whatever map you go on, when it comes to aerialistic, there seems to be defined paths that the majority of people go, and they're normally around the ground targets or the center of the map. A lot of people just take off and then boom, go straight away. Or what they do is they take off straight on their airfield and then just climb straight and go from there. I don't really understand why people do this, because there's actually much more efficient ways of playing the game, especially if you know your enemy is going to climb in a straight line. You can actually work around it and use some advantages for it, but for some reason that just doesn't really happen with a lot of people. But that's when they talk about, the flanks and everything like that they're able to do. And also at the same time, if you make the maps bigger, there are still going to be there's still going to be a bunch of people who try and get to the battle as quickly as possible, forcing a furball and then going from there. And that's pretty much how these top tier aerialistic battles go right now. Bunch of people spawn, they go incredibly fast to the center of the battlefield, then you have a fight for about 3 to 5 minutes, missiles go in, guns go in, everything goes crazy, and then the battle is done. And it seems like people are okay with this because they keep playing it over and over again. The queue times are incredibly short, and also the RP that you get out of it, if you do well, is not too bad. It could be better with elongated matches, but that's another story for another time. So you've got the beehive issue, you've got the fact that you always have meta ways of playing maps. No matter how big they are, there will still be areas of contention that people want to fight over. And then you have the example of Boulogne-sur-Mer when it comes to the larger echelons of the maps. Another map I haven't seen in ages is Norway. I don't know where Norway's gone. I'm sure it must be down to the fact that so many people have banned it or disliked it. I just don't see it anymore, in the map rotation, which is kind of sad because, at least for me, even though that had very defined ways of playing as well, especially in propellers, I did enjoy the map quite a lot. Are there any immediate plans to improve and expand the UK's top assault measures in terms of expanding sets of armament or adding new vehicles with them? Having only bombs or rockets on both Phantoms while neighbouring nations have fire and forget air-to-surface missiles as well as radio command and laser guidance missiles obviously is not the best deal. And the answer is AGM-12 missiles with radio command guidance are already in the British arsenal on the Buccaneer. As for more advanced missiles, their carriers must first be introduced into the game. And this is a limitation that, we've talked about in the past when it comes to vehicles in War Thunder. They have to have the armaments that they either used in real life or were able to use in real life. So, they didn't necessarily have to have them, but it had to be made sure that technically they could hold them. And if the Phantoms in the British tree were not able to use stuff such as Mavericks, then they're not going to get Mavericks. At the same time as well, it's not just the Buccaneer that has AGM-12s. The Scimitar also has 4 of them at 8.7. Everybody forgets about the Simi, and it's very sad because the Simi is actually pretty fun to fly. It just has a few issues when it comes to its tail at high speeds, meaning that it's very hard to control. But they do exist, so the British do have that stuff. At the same time, I would actually say, I'm not sure if this is the case, so I apologize if I'm wrong about this, because I haven't flown the vehicles. The British Phantoms, if they're the same as the American ones in the terms of like their bombing computers and stuff, they will have the arcade reticle in realistic with their bombs, which is insanely good when it comes to ground pounding in air realistic and also in ground realistic. So you already have, those options if that is available, and I apologize if it's not available. At the same time as well, I'm sure Britain will get some fire and forget stuff. It seems like Gaijin want to go down this road of fire and forget stuff. I disagree with it personally. I'm not very interested in it. I think it's one of those things which is a little bit of a step too far when it comes to War Thunder. I don't think you can effectively balance this and is going to cause a lot of issues, just like how Nords and bullpups have caused so many issues over the years and and needed so much refining and so much tweaking to be able to be what is deemed balanced, and still at this current stage are not balanced when it comes to the 8.7 German vehicles, for example. So for me, the fire and forget stuff is just going to get worse and worse and worse, meaning they're going to add more of it, and hopefully they refine the mechanics so it's not as let's call it brain dead to use. And then from there, I would be fine with more of it being expanded in the game to different nations. But right now, I would rather keep it concentrated so they can get the data available to be able to get it right before it's spread across the way. I really, really detest fire and forget stuff when it comes to aircraft. I think it takes a lot of the skill out of the game. I think it dumbs down a lot of the mechanics that exist. And also, if you are in a vehicle which is a rock to someone else's paper, then what you end up doing is you just get annihilated and there's nothing you can do about it. Like if you're in an MBT and then Mavericks start turning up, you can't see them, you can't hear them, and you can't defend against them unless you see the first one come in. Then maybe you can pop smoke, or maybe you can hide behind something. But it's very hard to detect if there is a plane in the air firing stuff like that at you. There's been a few times now where I've just been donked by Mavericks and there's nothing I can do about it because of the fact I'm in an MBT. And that's one of the major issues of top tier when it comes to ground forces, at least, this rock, paper, scissors mentality, and I don't personally want to expand that. But anyway, that is the questions and the answers for aviation for the developer Q&A. I thought overall the answers were pretty good. A lot of just, small ones, but it indicates where they're going in the future, and that to me is a positive. As always, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd like to thank BRFC, Swollen Ostrich, Teddy, John Ryman, Universe A, Conte Baraka, Eugens Terry, Ambrosius McClellan, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Lafouche, Barine, and Samuel Schlick for supporting the channel.